Christina Rahm,
Hi.
Cat Cora.
Hi, good to see you again.
We're both from the South.
You're both from South, yeah.
And we're going to talk about Cat today, and
Aw.
not us. This is
that.
Under the Red Chandelier, and then I know you're going to be on with Clay
Yep.
as well. But let's talk about you.
Okay.
So where are you from?
Jackson, Mississippi originally.
And you're famous.
Yeah, that's what they tell me.
Because you tell us.
Some days I'm not sure.
What's it like being famous? It's not always fun.
Yeah, it's not always fun. No, I mean, listen, I feel so blessed because I came from, a family that my dad was, school teacher. My mom was a nurse, I mean, and we didn't grow up with a lot of money. We grew up with a lot of love. We kind of had, we grew up with it was kind of all American. But yeah, I mean, so I feel so grateful that, whatever was in me that drove me to get to that place and continue to drive. And I know a lot of it was my grandmother was an amazing, feminist. She was a captain in the Army at one point, and she became a nurse. My mom went and got her doctorate in nursing at a time when in the South women didn't do that. They stayed home, And so I grew up with a lot of, my dad was a feminist, because he just loved women and loved supporting my mom and my family and me. And so I just feel like I grew up with such strong, just support and love to go do whatever I wanted to do and to follow my dreams. And that just isn't how you're always raised.
No.
A lot of people aren't raised that way. So a lot of my friends weren't. They were like, no, we just get married, stay home, have babies, and my parents and my family just didn't raise me that way. And they just raised me with that just tenacity and determination to go out and really, do great things in the world.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the drive that I got very early. And through a lot of trials and tribulations, a lot of challenges, a lot of trials, a lot of tribulations, a lot of, different things that went on in my life early on, and somehow
and you became
got there.
A famous chef.
Yeah.
But I understand that because I had the same thing. Strong women, master's, doctorate degrees for women back then were not typical, but that was my background as well with my parents and the women specifically. I love the men in my life. I say that all the time, but the women have been such strong influences for me that I didn't know I couldn't do whatever I wanted. I just knew. I remember even my father, like your father, saying, if you want to be president, you can be president.
Yeah.
You get to decide whatever you want. I do remember my mother and father saying it would be great if I were a teacher or a nurse. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying, that's not what I'm going to do.
Right.
Not that I'm against that at all, because a lot of the women in my family were teachers or in the medical field. My niece is a doctor. I mean, we did different things, and I ended up following that path. But I think what was interesting, too, about my family is there are a lot of artists and musicians and cooks.
Right.
Because cooking, to me, is an art and a science. I really believe that. And I think what I do with different formulas, and people have a hard time understanding this, but I'm like, it's an art. I use science, but I also use my artistic background. And so when I met you, and I had heard, of course, about you and what you've done, because you've been all over the television. What you do is I mean, listen, people don't like to do anything other than eat, except for maybe one other thing more.
That's true. It's true. I got this thing and I eat. That's good. I'm good.
I'm
well-rounded.
I remember my mother saying, Christina, someday sex and food are going to be really important in your life.
So true.
It's so true. And so you made a living out of that, and not just a living, but you've touched so many people because of that. So tell us what that was like growing up in a small town and then progressing to where you are and people knowing who you are. Because I know that's different. You grow up in a small area, and then now you walk in, and I'm sure people recognize you almost wherever you go. Yeah.
I mean, I think that, growing up in Jackson, I mean, it was a city, but yeah, it had a small town feel. I grew up Greek American in the South. My father I was adopted. So I was an orphan for 10 days.
Oh, you were?
I don't think a lot of people know that about me.
No, I didn't know that.
So I was an orphan for 10 days, and my birth mom was 16 when she, had sex for the first time and got pregnant, which happens a lot.
Which happens.
And then was, at that time, it was very taboo. like to be an unwed mother in the South in the 60s, and got sent to a home in New Orleans where it was pretty brutal for these young girls, and then came back and gave birth to me in the hallway of Hines General Hospital, which was, just didn't have insurance, so they put her in the hallway on a gurney, and this, midwife came by, this African-American woman who probably saved her. It was like in her 80s or whatever, and she shuffled over to her and wrapped her and like helped her push me out. And so that's kind of how I flew out into the world and started, and then they sent me to the children's home and then called my parents, and 10 days later I was adopted by my parents. My dad was Greek American, so my father. So it was really this incredible juxtaposition of having this whole family that I still have family in Greece on the island of Skopolis, and my grandfather coming through Ellis Island and settling in the South, because usually when you have someone come through and someone comes to Ellis Island, they're like, you have a cousin here, or go here, go here, go here. And they sent him to a cousin in the Delta of Mississippi.
I'm shocked
Greenville,
about that.
Greenville, Mississippi.
Really?
And so he actually started a restaurant. He started the Coney Island Cafe, because that was kind of an homage in New York, right?
Yeah.
And
he started that in Mississippi?
In Mississippi.
Because, I think I told you I lived in Mobile for 12 years.
Yeah, you did.
So, and I said you grew up in a small town. It's actually a city where you grew up, but it has a small town feel. Like if you go to New York and then you go to where you're raised, it's completely different because it's a city in the South.
Right.
But that's interesting.
Yeah, so he started that restaurant, then he moved to Greenville, and he continued to open up several cafes and restaurants. So he was in the restaurant business early on. And my father kind of got that, but he always wanted to teach. My parents were kind of scientists as well, and teachers, professors. I mean, they were in that field.
Yeah.
A lot of medical field, those days, it was very, a lot of psychologists, a lot of, bookshelves in my house were full of I'm okay, you're okay.
Yeah.
Carl Jung, like all of these psychology books and cookbooks.
You're going to fit in with my kids.
Psychology books and cookbooks. That was it.
That's like my life. Yeah. Because my first master's and my first doctorate degree were psychology.
Okay.
So same thing with my kids, like whatever, like I accepted whatever what was meant for them. Like to me, I didn't have I think that was what was so interesting about me as a psychologist raising kids. I didn't have a book of what I thought they should be like. I thought they should be whoever they were meant to be.
Right.
There wasn't like and I mean this, there wasn't like a occupation, a sexual preference, a political view that I wanted my kids to have. I just wanted them to be good humans.
Yeah.
And then to do whatever they loved. Right.
And that's how my parents raised us. My parents were telling us, because my mom was a nurse and she was in the medical field, so she would bring home books about sexuality and we'd be like, oh my God, Mom, like 8 years old,
I showed my kids books on sexuality, and they still talk about it. I'm looking at Clayton because he's probably laughing. They tell everyone, Mom brought us sex education books that talked about every sexual transmitted disease there was. And they were like, Mom, I go, let's just talk about the reality.
Yeah.
It's the best thing you'll ever do. One of the best things you'll ever do in your life. But there's consequences. So same thing. I approached it from a medical, but also I tell my kids, you imprint on someone during a relationship, whether it's us talking or a sexual relationship or a work relationship, you really are connecting. The cells are talking. So
definitely, your nervous system is listening.
Yeah,
it's all related.
It's like saying you're going to cook, and people make fun of me all the time, but I relate everything. Like I believe we share our DNA with the plant, right? Mm-hmm. The food we eat is so important to us because it's part of why we're here, and the exchange between food and human beings is huge. We actually share DNA, and people don't realize that. So what you put in your body, how it tastes, how it makes you feel, it matters, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I literally imparted all of that into my children, making sure that they understood every part of this life that we have that's a different approach, kind of like yours. It was a medical approach, but it was also a artistic approach and a psychological approach to how they were raised, which is very different, I think, than most environments. Yeah.
And I think, for me, I know it was very different than my friends, because it was interesting. We just had this, when I think about it now, I think back when we're talking about it, we were Greek Orthodox, but we were Southern. Neither of my parents were Southern. Like, they weren't born in the South. I mean, my dad was born in the South, but I mean, he was from a Greek family, so it was very different. And then growing up with these two different worlds, and then also having, my parents who, I've never met anybody who had more friends than my parents, like couple friends. Like, there must have been 10 friends, and they would talk every single week. What are we doing this weekend? Okay, it's St. Patrick's Day. We're going to the parade.
But that's pretty typical of the South or the Greek.
It was very typical of bringing that together. And these were 40-year, 30-year, 40-year relationships. And that they just...
Were they Greek or were they Southern?
No, they were all Southern. They were all from the South, but they were in the medical field. A lot of them were either teachers that my dad knew, and couple, or it was nurses and doctors and psychologists, and I would go to these parties with them. We would go to these parties with my brothers and I had two brothers, and I mean, it would be like everybody was in Kafkins, and it was like fondue and like homemade wine and like candles lit everywhere. It was just this kind of hippy dippy Southern, but not Southern.
Yeah, because the South doesn't have as much of that.
Very melting pot kind of ideology about how, and no one, as you said, no one had any predetermined idea of what you should be,
which is
and what you should do.
Different from the South.
And
I'm just saying that
because
in the South, I remember my friends and my sister and everyone having their like scrapbooks of what their houses were going to look like and their weddings, and I remember saying, I don't know that I'm going to get married, and then I would say, I don't know that I'm going to live in a house or have kids. And my mom and dad were like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, I think I'm going to be traveling everywhere. Mm-hmm. And at one point I thought I was going to be a missionary. So my question to you is, did you know what you were going to be? And that you were going to leave that town and do all these different things?
I did know I was going to leave town.
Yeah.
And I did feel very different in school than everybody else. I felt like there was something very different. Yes, I was a lesbian. Yeah. Yes, I was adopted. Yes, I had a very different upbringing in that. My family was Greek and and Southern. But I always felt within me that I had I had big things to do in the world. Like I knew that I was not going to stay. Where my best friend would say straight out, I'm getting married, I'm going to have babies, and I cannot wait to get my house and stay.
And did she do those things?
And she did, and she's as happy as can be.
Right, because that's
still
what I was going to say. There's nothing wrong with that.
She has a great life.
Yeah.
And
my sister's the same way, and she's amazing, but that wasn't what I wanted.
Right. That wasn't, I knew I was never built for that.
Yeah.
That was not my life. I knew that I had to, I wanted to leave. I wanted to go out in the world and see it. I always dreamed, I'm going to live in New York. I'm going to visit Paris. I'm going to go here. I mean, I was always daydreaming when I was kind of kicking the dirt around in the summer and visiting friends and stuff. I always had these dreams in the back of my head of what I was going to do. And I fulfilled all those and more.
I never felt, I wonder, I'm sure you were the same way. I never felt like I was better.
No.
At all. I just knew that it wasn't that wasn't my path, and I knew.
Yeah.
And I knew I was leaving my town.
Yeah.
And I loved my town. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I loved my family. I still
love
do.
going back. I mean, and I know when my parents are both passed now, which is doesn't connect me as much to Jackson anymore, but. When we'd go back and visit, I remember the last time we went back and we rented a house on the reservoir, you know, in the water, and we taught all the boys how to fish for catfish, and we had a big fish fry. My brothers came, and my mom was there, and we had a big fish fry and made hush puppies, and
they have
the best time.
They have great fish
great memories.
And is that how you learned to make catfish and hush puppies? Did you love to cook when you were little? Because I thought I was going to be a famous chef, just so you know.
Oh, wow, that's good.
You're going to have to
I thought at one point I was going to be a doctor, so we switched. Maybe we were switched at birth.
I was going to be Julia. Maybe we were. I wanted to be Julia Childs. And so I would come up with these recipes, and I remember everyone would be like, they're not very good.
It's hilarious.
I didn't have the gift. But I wanted to be because I thought it was such a gift to make food for people.
And it is. It's a wonderful gift. I do it for my kids every single day and my family, and I love seeing their faces when I make something. And
so did you know? When did you start loving?
I mean, listen, I think that I grew up, growing up in a Greek home, because even though we were Southern and we were in the South, we were more Mediterranean and Greek. That's how I was raised, Greek Orthodox. I was raised Greek Orthodox. My mom converted to Greek Orthodoxy, and she wasn't, Greek. She sang in the choir. I mean,
But
went all in.
Your daddy was Greek.
My dad was.
We have a best friend, Mimi Pullman, that was Amelia.
Yeah.
She was raised. Her parent. They're Greek.
Yeah.
And she brought us into that environment. We even spoke at the World Economic Forum for the Greek House.
Amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, I know the culture. Yeah. And I love that culture, by the way. We have a company in Greece. We love going there. When people ask me where do I want to live when I grow up, I'm like Italy or Greece because I just love both of those.
There's something so magical about both of those places, and the people, and that something about Greece and being in the islands. And I think that Have
you been to Santorini and Mykonos and
all those? Yeah,
we do too. We love.
Yeah. And Skopelos, where Mamma Mia was filmed, is where my family lives. I still have 2 cousins. My aunt lives. My uncle passed away, but I've spent time with them and visited them.
But your mom wasn't Greek, so who had the love of cooking?
Well, both. My dad was a grill meister, so he taught me how to smoke meats, grill meats, marinate meats, do rubs. I mean, he was like a master on the grill. Like that was his thing. And the 2 things he would make in the house would be stuffed peppers and rice pilaf. And those were the like things that he would make in the house. My mom usually cooked mostly in the house. He did all the grilling,
and you
smoking
helped?
Meats. And I would always help. They would always pull me in. And my grandmother made the best cheesecakes you could ever imagine. My mom taught me how to make. She went to the church ladies, the Greek church ladies, and said, "Teach me." When she got married to my dad, and said, "Teach me how to make everything, all the Greek food." And they did. And so they taught her how to make them.
I want to be at your house.
Yeah, come anytime, and you're all invited. But they taught her how to make, and then she passed that down to me. So when I was little, if we would help, and everybody kind of pitched in when there was a baptism or a wedding, a Greek wedding, everybody kind of pitched in and made things. And so I would sit there, and I was rolling phyllo dough and making baklava when I was 7 years old. I was rolling grape leaves with my mom when I was 7 years old, like from a very young age. Making kourakia, which are the twisted sesame cookies, or paxmadi, or any spanakopita, all of these.
So how do you feel about GMOs in our world? Because I have to tell you, you may or may not know this about me. My basically postgraduate and doctorate was focused on bioscience engineering and nanotechnology.
Wow.
You're
really smart, right? That means you're really smart.
No, but they'll say to me like, well,
wicked smart.
Those scientists created GMOs and nuclear waste. I'm like, yeah, I went back to school to figure out how to get rid of it.
That's amazing.
Because the problem is GMOs actually have some of the same structure as like if a nuclear bomb went off. And the issue with that is like I've been to Chernobyl, right? Mm-hmm. I've been to where Hiroshima happened. I've been to all of those things. And the problem is the seeds, the plants, everything that is exposed to that are created differently after that. And I, as I spoke earlier, our DNA it'd be like, how would you feel if I put a nuclear, bomb or isotopes inside of you? You'd be like, no. Well, then why are we putting GMOs in?
That's so true.
And there's nothing we can really do about it. If you're a chef and I'm a scientist that's developing like Relive Greens or different products we have, I'm dealing with what I have, right?
Right.
So one of my things I've done as a scientist is to basically clean plants and roots and seeds and everything out, which I can't offer that to the world, obviously, because it's too big of a project. But we do it in our different products. So I guess my question to you is, do you ever think about that when you cook? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for me, it's really important that I always procure sustainable ingredients that are clean, that I can control at least.
Right, because like in Greece, they don't have as many GMOs.
Oh, no.
Or Italy, they don't allow it.
Even when I was growing up in the South, like we our gardens were just fresh gardens.
Yeah, we
didn't put anything on them.
Yeah,
we grew everything organically, quote unquote. I mean, that's how we grew.
Right.
And in the South, you learn from a very young age. You grow everything. We grew peppers and eggplant and squash and zucchini and tomatoes and cucumbers and everything. Yeah. And then you pass them on to your neighbors. And that was how you did it. You share everything. Oh, I got too many tomatoes. My tomatoes are overgrown.
Peaches, right?
Here's a bag of tomatoes, And so I think growing up that way, it's always been important to me to just maintain that as much as is in my control.
Yeah, that's how I am as a scientist.
And also speak out and speak about that, especially about sustainability.
Yeah.
And passing on the continuous future of clean and clean environment, clean, sustainable ingredients, and harvesting sustainable ingredients, whether it's seafood harvesting or ranching or what have you, and passing that on as much as possible. And that's been important in all of my restaurants and everything I do.
I was thinking about you the other day because I actually was in France and we were working with some of the famous cyclists, and I met with basically their government on their fish.
Wow.
And about the microplastic in the fence. And I was gonna. That's one of the things I wanted to ask you during the interview because I was interested in if you know about those things and how it impacts you. There's nothing we can do. I mean, if the fish have microplastics, and our bodies are smart, so we adjust, right? So people always worry that like, okay, this is happening in the fish, and how are our bodies handling it? And I'm not saying it's good for us,
right?
But our bodies actually acclimate because we have no option, right?
And we've been living like that for so long, and it continues to cycle down in each generation. And so your body's immunity continuously is fighting against those things because it's learned that. Yeah. And what you're saying, and absolutely.
But I do think restaurants like yours and other people that are chefs that are really honestly famous understand about food, and they try to find the most sustainable options. It's the same way in our space. If you're doing supplements, for example, you've got people, you know this, some people are they have a restaurant but the food's not great, right?
Yeah,
same thing with my industry. They can produce something but it may not be great,
right?
But I do think people that are like you are aware.
And you continuously have to learn, and you continuously have to make yourself aware of what's happening and everything that's going on in your industry. It's important. You have an obligation to do that to your customers and to everyone that you service as well. And I think that in talking about that, that's why it's so important that I've been a big proponent in supporting natural farming.
Yeah, me too.
For salmon, for catfish, catfish farming is one of the first, farms, that we had in the U.S. going back to the 60s, and trying to make sure that, we have a voice in those those industries, because we're the ones who are saying they need to remain sustainable. And clean.
Right.
And supporting that and making the public aware of how important it is to support that farming.
I do. I even went to one of Sadhguru's. He does a lot of stuff on like natural farming. And met with a bunch of farmers because I was raised in a farming community, and I do support natural farmers. It's important to me. And you being raised where you were raised, I'm sure it's important to you too. I mean, I was raised in an environment where, like you, we had fresh everything. Right. Because that's how our heritage was. That's what we did. You cooked everything. And then to go into a city and then to go into an environment where I really wasn't as educated, I just knew we grew fresh tomatoes. We grew peaches. And it was interesting. Our gardens that we had in our house, we really didn't use a lot of pesticides or a lot of things like that. But our main farms... we ended up doing that. The food we ate was really, really healthy, but when you're growing mass amounts of wheat, for example, or soybeans or corn, that's where it comes into it, where you're using different things. So like the last 10 years of my life, I have started doing talks on sustainability and food, and even working with some governments on projects, trying to bring that in.
Fascinating,
It's a lot of work, though. I have to be... I try not to get overwhelmed with global topics, but I also, like you, try to contribute and make as good of an influence as I can, knowing that you can't change everything. And
it's true. I mean, and globally, it's such a big. I mean, I had a charity, Chefs for Humanity, and we've done so much global work and missions around the world on cooperative farms. And third world. Places like Ethiopia and Mozambique and, all over the world, Guatemala, Ecuador, Haiti after the earthquake, places like that. And it's such a big, big topic. And it can be overwhelming because we want to save the world.
And you can't,
and but everything you do, each thing that we do is one piece of quilt of that fabric of that quilt.
It is.
And it helps.
It helps. That's what I was going to say. Like, people get overwhelmed with and I do too, with all the issues, but then I step back and I think of all the people I'm working with, and I know that we are trying to make a difference in our own worlds and our own lives, because you have to start with you. It's kind of like eating. You have to start with your own body and what you're choosing to eat. And I say this to people all the time. I eat predominantly healthy, but then I also eat what I want.
Yeah.
I know.
You have a little indulgence.
I do.
I kind of do 80-20. That's my kind of
like
80-20.
me.
Sometimes it's 90-10.
Yeah.
And then if I'm going to dinner and I'm, really having a night out, then it might be 70-30.
Yeah.
But then I jump back onto the 80-20. I kind of keep it right there.
Yeah. And people think because of what I do for a living, they're like, you must eat healthy all the time. I'm like, no.
Yeah. And by the way, 80 is the healthy part and 20 is the indulgent part. I just want to clear that up.
Yeah,
because
I try, I would say,
try
70,
really
80% of the time to really eat. It's important. Like I have my greens.
Yeah.
I put our products into what we do. My specialty is really detoxing and anti-aging because that's been a focus. But when I say it, the anti-aging is because if you can reverse the age of a cell or of even a plant, then you're basically healthier. Right. And so I've gotten
so
into
true.
Yeah. So it's not just about what people look like to me. It's about how they are healthy on the inside and out.
Someone can look so, I always say this about my, I know people, I've had friends, I've had relatives, they can look so healthy from the outside and not be healthy on the inside.
Exactly.
And so I think it's important, and I explain that to my kids who are various sizes. Like just because you're thin
doesn't mean you're healthy.
Doesn't mean you're healthy.
That's a misunderstanding.
And that is a misunderstanding. And I think that there's a lot of misinformation about that.
Yeah, I do too. When it was interesting at the World Economic Forum, our main topic was obesity. And
that's a big one.
The issue with diabetes, but I know you know this. Some people can be very thin and have diabetes.
Oh, of course,
because the insulin's not working correctly in the body. And I just recently got involved in the microbiome project and looking at the microbiome and how food is impacting it. I'm going to have you to some of these meetings. I'd love to have you involved.
We'll talk after this and see what's going on, because it's something that I've always been very. Being a chef is one thing, but there's so many other dynamics to that.
Oh, yeah,
if you really are passionate about it, and I'm passionate about many things, technology, how food, health and wellness, because I have a degree in exercise physiology and nutrition before I became a chef. A lot of people don't know that. Yeah. So I was into health and wellness way back before it became trendy. So you really
cared about it.
So I cared about it, and I still care about it. So it's been something that, I was probably an unhealthy teenager and we didn't have a lot of money, so I ate whatever you eat what is given put in front of you.
At least
and my mom was fairly healthy, like she tried to eat healthy and she ran and she exercised, but at 19 though I changed my whole body. Like I went in, something clicked for me and I became extremely fit. And that became really, and eating healthy, and that was at 19, and I'm 57 now. So I really took, I turned around my life in a way around health and wellness a long, long time ago, and it's really always been important to me.
Yeah. Well, I really want to have you to Nashville. I know I've asked you. I really do, and to the farm, and because what we're really trying to do is, and I don't know that we'll ever make money from this. Like a lot of stuff you do in your life, especially when you get to around our age, you're doing things to help people, right?
Right.
So we really, even our pond, we have a product called Clean Slate that we use for people, but it also has a formula that remediates land, air, and water.
Oh, wow.
So with our catfish and our land, we're doing all of that, really trying to create a healthy environment. We have a 37-year-old horse, so we're like...
That's amazing.
We want people to live to be 120 if they can, and if they want to, because I say
and
this
if they're healthy, 120.
If they're healthy. You don't want to live and be miserable at 120, right? No. You want to be happy.
Yeah.
If not, then maybe it's your time to go before that, because every day's a gift. But it was really nice talking to you.
This is amazing. I can't wait to catch up after this. We're definitely coming to Nashville, so be ready.
Well, we're ready. We're ready. So Nashville, I was telling you, then we can go to the lake in Kentucky, bring the kids. So all of our houses, except for our own house, although we redid the house, we can sleep like 17, 18 people.
That's amazing.
In our farm. And we developed we'll have to show you later, an art house. So Clayton, I was like, I'm an artist. So I was like, I want to do an art house. I want to do a pottery and, just do it. So they started building it. It has cedar shakes and then a tin roof and everything.
I love that.
And I'm like, that looks like a big art house. It is 2,200 square feet. So
what is your medium? Is it pottery? Is your medium that you really like? Acrylics.
I do oils.
I do too. So did we talk about this last time? I'm a painter too. I love to paint.
I didn't know that.
I'm working on one that's probably like it's huge right now.
That's what I do, like things that are huge, like
probably like the size of that wall right now that I'm working on right now. And it takes me a little longer because I have a lot of things going on. So I come back to it and walk away, come back to it. But I've loved painting.
Me too.
It's such an amazing outlet.
I use even like dirt and sand. I'll throw it onto the acrylics, and I'll use like oils. I'll show you when you come to the house.
Oil. I love oil. It takes a long time for it to dry, so I get impatient. But
I'll
do
just,
love
like,
oils.
leave it there.
Yeah, I do love oils, but I have started doing a few more mediums, like some spray paint, some acrylic, some a little bit of other things. But it's such a great.
I don't do it enough. I want to do it more.
And by the way, y'all out there, you don't have to be an amazing. It's just for yourself.
It's just for yourself
and for your family. You know,
I'm not like a great artist. I always say that I just love art.
I just love it.
Yeah.